will take the revenge of my siblings.
There was a time before names were spoken, before the mountains rose, before the seas found their place. A time when the world was nothing but emptiness. That emptiness was called chaos. It was not darkness, but there was no light to oppose it. It was not silence, but there was no sound to break it. It was a vast and endless void, stretching beyond thought or dream. From that endless void, the first stirrings of creation began. Shapes formed, faint at first, then stronger. Forces without flesh, but alive all the same. From chaos came Gaia, the earth itself. She was the ground, the soil, the stone, the mountains yet to rise. She was more than land. She was life potential and the womb of everything yet to come. Above her appeared Uranus, the sky. He was vast, high, eternal, a dome of endless heavens, covering Gaia with light and stars yet unborn. Earth and sky met. Together they became the first union, the bond of below and above. From them, the first true beings were born, the Titans. They were the first giants, colossal figures of raw force and immortal essence, not fragile like men would one day be, not fleeting like creatures of dust. The Titans were carved out of eternity itself. Their voices were thunder. Their steps shook the foundations of the newborn earth. And their presence was so great that even the gods who came later would tremble at the memory of them. But the story of these giants did not begin with battle. It began with creation, a time when the universe itself was young and every shadow stretched long with destiny. Gaia loved her children. From her body, mountains rose. From her heart, rivers flowed. She gave life and form to the world, shaping beauty out of the formless void. Uranus stretched above, covering all with his unending sky. He crowned the night with stars and wrapped the day in blazing light. And between them, the Titans grew. There were 12 in all, each one a force of nature, each one eternal. They were not gods in the way Zeus or Poseidon would later be known. They were older, raw, closer to the bones of the earth itself. Oceanus, endless waters flowing without end. Hyperion, the bright light of heaven. Thea, shining with divine radiance. Mnemosyne, keeper of memory, the mind of eternity. And among them, Cronus, youngest and yet most cunning of all. These names carried weight beyond time. For the Titans were not just figures. They were the building blocks of reality. To speak their names was to speak of rivers, light, memory, power. And so the Golden Age began. But the seeds of discord were already stirring. Uranus looked upon his children, and his heart grew heavy. They were strong, too strong. Their size, their power, their presence. Each one a rival. Each one a reminder that even he, the sky, might one day fall. Fear crept into him. And fear, once rooted, grows like shadow across the light. Though they were his children, Uranus began to despise them. He saw in them not love, but threat. And so, he forced them back into the depths of Gaia, their own mother. He buried them deep within the earth, hiding them away where no eye could see. Gaia groaned with pain. Her body strained as the weight of her children pressed inside her. The mountains cracked, the seas trembled, and the earth cried out with sorrow. But Uranus did not care. His fear was stronger than his love. The Titans, trapped and bound, grew restless. Their cries echoed inside Gaia's womb, shaking the foundations of the newborn world. And Gaia's sorrow began to change. Pain turned into anger, anger into vengeance. She loved her children too much to let them be chained forever. And so, in secret, Gaia began a plan. It was then that Cronus, youngest of the 12, stepped forward. He was not the largest nor the strongest, but his spirit was sharp and his courage sharper still. He listened to his mother's whispers, to the plan she carried within her heart. Gaia shaped a sickle from unyielding stone, sharp and merciless. She gave it to Cronus, and with it, she gave him the burden of destiny. The time had come for father to be struck down, and for son to rise in his place. The night was silent when Uranus descended to Gaia. The stars watched in stillness. Unaware that fate itself was about to shift, Cronus lay in wait, hidden, his hands clutching the stone blade. His breath burned, his blood raced. And when Uranus drew near, Cronus struck. The blow was swift, cruel, final. The power of the sky was broken. Uranus fell, his cries shaking the heavens. From his blood spilled on the earth, new and dreadful beings were born. Spirits of vengeance, creatures of shadow. But the throne of creation was no longer his. Cronus rose. The chains were broken. The Titans were free. And so began the reign of the first giants, the rule of the Titans, an age when the world was theirs, and the heavens no longer belonged to the sky. The golden age had dawned, but within its brilliance, the roots of future wars were already alive. For in every act of rebellion, destiny whispers again. As Cronus struck down his father, so one day his own son would strike him. The cycle of giants and gods had begun. Yet even in the dawn of creation, where light and harmony reigned, the seeds of conflict were quietly being planted. The world was young, and creation still echoed with the first breath of chaos. From a union of earth and sky came 12 beings whose names would echo through the ages. They were vast, powerful, and eternal, the Titans. They were not shadows nor whispers. They were forces that could be seen, felt, and feared. Oceanus, who carried the endless waters that circled the earth. His rivers stretched without end, wrapping around a newborn world in a current that no mortal eye would ever see. Tethys, his sister and consort, who nurtured those waters, guiding them into streams, springs, and rivers that fed the earth. Hyperion, radiant and proud, whose gaze brought light into the heavens. His eyes glowed like twin suns, for he was a spark of brightness before the sun itself was born. Beside him stood Theia, who shone with dazzling beauty, the mother of brilliance, whose gifts would one day become the sun, the moon, and the stars. Themis, embodiment of divine law, balance, and order, whose presence gave harmony to all things. Mnemosyne, keeper of memory, who held the thoughts of eternity and the secrets of the ages yet to come. Phoebe, who carried the glow of prophecy, her mind like a silver flame that could pierce into the hidden paths of fate. Zeus, her brother, whose thoughts reached the heavens, seeking wisdom in the uncharted corners of the cosmos. Crius, often silent, yet his presence was sharp as a blade, a force that guided the constellations and the hidden corners of the firmament. And then there were Cronus and Rhea. Cronus, the youngest, but no less powerful. He was ambitious, restless, watchful. His eyes burned with cunning that none of his brothers possessed. He listened, he waited, he calculated. For Cronus was not content to stand beneath his father's shadow forever. Rhea, his sister, calm yet strong, who would one day be called the mother of gods. In her hands rested gentleness, yet behind her calm eyes was a strength to carry the weight of destiny itself. These were the children of earth and sky, the first giants, the Titans. They were not monsters. They were not horrors to be feared. They were balance itself. They embodied the forces of nature, the eternal order of existence. Where Oceanus flowed, Hyperion burned. Where Themis gave law, Mnemosyne gave memory. Together, they were the foundation of the cosmos. Yet even perfection could be clouded by fear. Uranus, the sky, looked upon his children. They were vast, and their strength grew daily. He saw not harmony, but threat. The Titans were his own blood, his own flesh. Yet when he gazed into their eyes, he saw rivals waiting to rise. The thought tormented him. What if one day, as he acclaimed Gaia for himself, one of his children would reach upward to claim the heavens from him? Fear turned to bitterness. Bitterness turned to cruelty. Though they were his own children, Uranus began to despise them. And so he did the unthinkable. He forced them down into the depths of Gaia herself. The mountains opened, the rivers cracked, and the children of earth and sky were buried alive within their mother's body. Gaia groaned with agony. Her own flesh tore as her children were pressed deep inside her. The earth trembled with sorrow, and rivers of pain flowed through her veins. Still, Uranus did not stop. The more his children cried, the deeper he forced them into the womb of Gaia. The laughter of Oceanus was silenced. The light of Hyperion was swallowed in darkness. The wisdom of Zeus and the visions of Phoebe were shut away in suffocating night. And Gaia, the mother of all, endured their cries within her. Her heart ached with endless grief. For what mother could bear such torment? To feel her children alive yet chained, their voices muffled, their freedom stolen, their light denied? The pain grew heavier, pressing against her from within. Her skin cracked into mountains. Her breath hissed into storms. The ocean swelled with her grief. Her sorrow became unbearable. At first, she pleaded with Uranus. She begged him to release their children, but the sky was unyielding. His fear was greater than his love. His paranoia blinded him to her suffering. And so Gaia's sorrow turned into anger. Her anger became fury, and her fury grew into vengeance. No mother could endure forever. Deep within her, she began to scheme. She could not free her children alone. She needed one of them to rise, one who would not tremble before the might of the sky. Her cries reached her imprisoned children, and among them, one listened more closely than the rest. Cronus, the youngest, the most cunning, the one who had always been watchful, while the others groaned in despair. Cronus studied his father's cruelty. He saw Uranus descend each night to cover the earth, blind to the power that lay within his children. Cronus felt the weight of his mother's pain pressing through the stones, and his resolve hardened. Gaia whispered to him, her voice echoing like a heartbeat within the walls of the earth. She told him that destiny could be shaped, that chains could be broken, and that even the sky could bleed. Cronus listened. His eyes glowed with ambition. He did not fear his father as the others did. He did not mourn like Oceanus, nor rage like Hyperion. Instead, he planned. He calculated. He prepared. Gaia crafted a weapon from the hardest stone, unbreakable and sharp. A sickle, curved like the crescent moon. She placed it into Cronus's hands, and in doing so, gave him more than a blade. She gave him the power of rebellion. Her suffering had reached its limit. Her vengeance was ready, and Cronus accepted it. He swore he would not falter. He would rise against the sky. The cries of the imprisoned titans grew louder. The earth itself quaked with anticipation, for though they were still bound, they knew that one of their own was preparing to rise. Uranus, blind in his pride, saw none of this. He looked only to the heavens, believing himself eternal, believing that nothing, not even his own children, could ever touch him. But destiny had already shifted. The first stone of rebellion had already been set, and the hand of Cronus was already reaching for his father's throne. A mother's pain had become a weapon. A son's ambition had become destiny. The earth held its breath. The stars above shimmered in silence, and the bond between earth and sky trembled, on the edge of being broken forever. A mother's suffering soon turned into wrath, and Gaia's plan for vengeance would forever change the course of heaven and earth. The night was still. The stars hung above in silence, unaware that the balance of creation was about to break. Gaia's pain had reached its limit. For too long, her children had been buried within her, trapped by the cruelty of their father, Uranus, the sky. Her cries shook the mountains. Her sorrow poured into rivers. Her fury burned beneath the earth. No longer could she endure. No longer would she remain silent. From her heart, she shaped a weapon, a sickle of jagged stone, sharp and unyielding, curved like the crescent moon. It was forged from the very bones of the earth, a blade born from anguish and vengeance. She placed it into the hands of her youngest son, Cronus. Cronus was not the largest of the Titans. He was not the brightest, nor the most radiant. But he was bold, he was cunning, and where his brothers and sisters hesitated, Cronus stepped forward without fear. His mother's whispers filled his ears, and he swore to carry out her will. That night, Uranus descended as he always had, to cover the earth with his vast sky. His presence was heavy, his voice booming, his pride unbroken. He did not see what lay in the shadows. He did not sense the fire of rebellion hidden beneath Gaia's sorrow. Cronus waited in silence, his heart burning, the stone sickle tight in his grasp. He listened to the thunder of his father's approach, the sweep of the sky descending closer. He knew this was the moment. When Uranus drew near, Cronus struck. The sickle cut with sound that tore through heaven itself. Uranus cried out, his voice echoing across the stars. His power, once endless, was severed in a single blow. The sky recoiled, retreating upward, broken and defeated. His blood spilled upon the earth, soaking into Gaia's soil. From that blood rose beings of terror, spirits of vengeance known as the Furies, creatures born of wrath and punishment. Giants also stirred, towering figures of chaos, their strength echoing the cruelty of their father's fall. And from a foam that gathered upon the sea, another power would one day emerge, beautiful yet dangerous. But in that moment, the reign of Uranus ended. The chains of the Titans were broken. The earth groaned in relief, freed from the weight of her imprisoned children. And Cronus stood tall, his hands stained with the act that had changed the course of eternity. The rule of the Titans had begun. Under Cronus, the heavens grew silent. No longer did Uranus thunder over the earth. The stars hung steady, and the world entered a new age. Cronus declared himself king of the cosmos. His brothers and sisters gathered, and for the first time, the Titans stood as rulers of creation. The rivers flowed freely under Oceanus. The sky gleamed with Hyperion's light. The wisdom of Zeus, the visions of Phoebe, the law of Themis, all gave shape and order to the world. It was the dawn of the Golden Age. Mortals, when they first came into being, lived without toil. The earth yielded her gifts freely. Crops grew without planting. Trees bent low with fruit. The seas were calm, the skies clear, the winds gentle. It was a time of harmony, when men lived in peace, untouched by hunger or grief. The Titans were not yet feared as monsters. They were seen as guardians, as rulers of balance. Their presence held the universe steady. And at the center of this harmony stood Cronus, king of kings. But power does not come without shadow. Cronus, though triumphant, was not blind to the whispers of fate, for his father Uranus, in his final cries, had spoken words that could not be forgotten. He had cursed Cronus, declaring that just as he had been betrayed by his own son, so too would Cronus one day be overthrown by his own child. These words clung to Cronus's heart. They haunted his throne. Even as he ruled in glory, he could feel the breath of destiny at his neck. The prophecy was simple, but terrible. The son who rose against the father would, in turn, be struck down by his own son. A cycle without end, a chain of betrayal, as eternal as time itself. Cronus, bold and cunning, had thought himself above fear. But now fear crept into him as it once had into Uranus. Fear whispered that his crown was not safe. Fear told him that his children would one day rise against him. And in that fear, seeds of cruelty began to grow. The Titans, though free, began to see the cost of Cronus's rule. He was cunning, but cunning hardens into suspicion. He was bold, but boldness turns into pride. His heart, once eager for justice, grew heavy with the same poison that had destroyed Uranus. Paranoia. The golden age glittered on the surface, but shadows stir beneath. For power, one sees, is never easily kept, and destiny is not so easily silenced. Cronus ruled with Rhea beside him, his sister and queen, together. They reigned over a world that flourished in peace. To mortals, their age was golden. To the Titans, their power seemed endless. Yet Gaia, the mother of all, knew better. She had seen the rise of Uranus and his fall. She had seen her youngest son take his place. And she knew that fate was a circle. What is built will crumble. What rises will fall. Cronus himself had been a hand of rebellion once. And one day, another hand would rise against him. The whispers of destiny could not be silenced. They echoed through the roots of the earth, across the waves of the sea, into the breath of the wind. Even the stars, shining cold in the heavens, seemed to hold a memory of Uranus's curse. Cronus tried to push it away. He tried to enjoy the throne he had won. He told himself he was stronger than destiny, wiser than prophecy, greater than any warning spoken by his father. But the shadow remained, and in time, that shadow would drive him to choices darker than any he had yet made. The reign of Cronus was the reign of the Titans. It was the age of giants. It was a time of peace on the surface. Yet beneath, the roots of betrayal and vengeance grew deeper. For from the blood of Uranus had come not only monsters and spirits of chaos, but the promise that blood will always call for blood. Cronus stood tall, crowned in triumph, his sickle still glistening with the memory of his father's fall. The earth was his, the heavens his, the seas his. Yet even as he smiled, destiny whispered, the cycle was not broken. It had only begun, though Cronus now ruled. Shadows of destiny whispered that his own downfall was already written. The reign of Cronus had begun. The sickle that cut the sky had opened a new chapter of creation. With Uranus gone and the Titans freed, the world entered a time unlike any before it. Mortals would later call it the Golden Age, and for good reason. It was an age without sorrow. The earth yielded her gifts freely. Wheat and barley grew tall, without seed or plow. Fruit ripened heavy on the branches, falling into eager hands. Rivers flowed clear, bringing fish to every shore. Herds grazed upon endless meadows, never starving, never hunted. In this age, men lived without labor. No sweat marked their foreheads. No chains of poverty or hunger weighed them down. They lived long lives in peace, their days filled with harmony. Death came gently, like sleep without pain, without fear. The air itself was softer. The skies shone brighter. No storms raged. No winters froze the land. The seasons moved in perfect balance, guided by the hand of the Titans. Cronus ruled as king. His voice carried authority. His presence was vast, and his words shaped the order of all things. By his side stood Rhea, his queen, gentle yet powerful, the mother of balance. Oceanus circled the earth, his waters flowing endlessly, feeding rivers, lakes, and seas. Hyperion shone light across the heavens, his radiance touching every hill and valley. Themis gave law, silent but unshakable, ensuring that even in abundance, order held. Mnemosyne kept memory, holding the past so that nothing would be lost in the flow of time. Together, the Titans shaped a world that seemed eternal. Mortals looked upon them not with fear, but with reverence. To men, the Titans were not monsters, but guardians. Their size, their strength, their presence. They were proof that the universe was in balance. Giants they were, but giants of harmony. Songs were sung of their reign. Mortals spoke of the beauty of endless harvests, of life without grief, of a world where justice and peace were the natural order. The Golden Age was a dream made real. Yet even in a dream, shadows can stir. Behind the calm face of Cronus lay a secret, a memory that gnawed at him night after night. The curse of Uranus. When Cronus struck down his father, the sky had cried out with his last breath, "As you betrayed me, so too shall you be betrayed. Your child will rise against you, and your throne will fall." Those words clung to Cronus's heart like chains. Outwardly, he was king of kings, ruler of giants, lord of the Golden Age. But within him, a storm brewed. The prophecy whispered every time he looked upon Rhea, every time she bore him children. Fear stirred in him like poison, for he remembered he had been the hand of rebellion once. And if the curse was true, then his own child would one day raise that same hand against him. Cronus began to change. Where once he had ruled with calm confidence, now he looked upon every shadow with suspicion. His smile carried weight, but his eyes grew sharp with doubt. He hid his fear behind power, yet it consumed him all the same. Rhea saw it. She watched her husband pace, restless, his mind heavy with thoughts he would not share. She felt the cold distance that had grown between them, though her heart still sought harmony. The other Titans felt it as well. Oceanus flowed in silence. Hyperion shone without question. Themis held her law. But Cronus's unease rippled to the Golden Age like cracks beneath a golden mask. Fear has a way of spreading. It begins as a whisper in the dark, then grows into a shadow that covers everything. And Cronus's fear was not only of prophecy, it was of himself. He had betrayed his father. He had seized a throne with blood. He knew what it meant to strike against kin, and he knew what it meant to be struck down. The thought haunted him, as if his very crown were forged not from glory, but from chains. Yet to the world, the Golden Age still flourished. Men lived in peace. The Titans ruled in harmony. Crops grew, Rivers flowed, skies gleamed. Children laughed without knowing hunger. Elders slept without knowing pain. It was paradise on the surface, but beneath, the roots of destiny stirred. For no age, no matter how bright, is eternal. Even gold, when pressed long enough, begins to bend. Cronus sat upon his throne, the sickle of stone never far from his grasp. He gazed at the world he had shaped, yet his heart did not rest. His mind drifted to shadows yet unborn, to children yet unseen, to the hand that prophecy promised would one day strike against him. And though the golden age shone with light, Cronus's heart darkened with fear. Fear can twist even the most noble king. It can turn golden days into black nights. It can poison love, corrode trust, and transform a reign of harmony into a reign of terror. Cronus carried that fear with him, heavy and endless. He carried it into every feast, every celebration, every moment of peace. And it whispered to him, louder and louder, until he could no longer silence it. The golden age was not yet ended. Mortals still lived in bliss. The Titans still shaped the cosmos with strength and balance. But the seed of dread had already been planted in the heart of their king. And seeds, when left to grow, always bear fruit. Fear can turn even golden days into dark nights, and Cronus's fear soon consumed him. The golden age shone bright upon the earth. Fields ripened without seed, rivers flowed without end, and mortals lived free of pain and sorrow. To the world outside, it seemed as though Cronus had fulfilled his promise as king, guiding creation into balance. But within the walls of his palace, shadows grew darker. Rhea, queen of the Titans, gave birth to their first child. A moment that should have been filled with joy and celebration was instead smothered in dread. For Cronus remembered the words of his father Uranus, the curse that one of his children would rise to overthrow him, just as he had once struck down the sky. He looked upon the tiny newborn, innocent and helpless, and felt terror gnaw at his heart. The prophecy was alive in his mind, whispering that this child was the one who would end him. And so, with no hesitation, Cronus reached forward, opened his mouth, and swallowed his firstborn whole. The child vanished into darkness, trapped forever within the belly of the king. Rhea screamed, her cries echoing across the stone halls, but Cronus's eyes were cold. To him, it was the only way to silence destiny. Time passed, and Rhea bore another child. Her arms trembled as she held the infant, clinging to hope that Cronus's heart might soften. But the king of the Titans was unmoved. The moment he laid eyes on the newborn, he remembered Uranus's curse, and fear seized him once more. Again, Cronus opened his mouth. Again, he swallowed his child whole. And again, the palace shook with the sound of Rhea's grief. One after another, the children of Cronus were born, and one after another, they were devoured. Hestia, the gentle flame. Demeter, the bearer of harvest. Hera, destined for queenship. Hades, ruler of shadow. Poseidon, lord of the seas. Each one, gone before they could take their first steps, swallowed by the father who feared them. To the outside world, the golden age seemed untouched. Mortals still lived in peace. Crops still grew. The rivers still sang. No man or woman knew of the horror hidden behind the walls of the Titan's palace. But inside, silence reigned. The halls that should have rung with children's laughter echoed only with the quiet sobs of a grieving mother. Rhea carried her pain in secret. She walked among the mortals with her head high, hiding her sorrow behind the face of a queen. Yet every night she wept. Her arms longed to hold her children, but her embrace was always left empty. She pleaded with Cronus, begged him to stop. She told him that destiny could not be cheated, that swallowing their children would not silence the prophecy. But Cronus's heart had turned to stone. He trusted no one. He loved no one more than his throne. Fear had made him cruel. The other Titans looked upon their king with unease. They had followed him once when he struck down Uranus, believing in his courage. But now, they saw only a tyrant consumed by shadows. Gaia, the mother of all, felt sorrow for her daughter Rhea. She remembered the day Cronus had freed her from Uranus's torment, and she remembered the hope she had placed in him. Yet she also remembered the curse of fate. She knew the cycle was not broken. It had only begun anew. The sins of the father had returned in the son. Cronus sat upon his throne, proud and unyielding. He believed he had silenced destiny, one child at a time. Each swallowed infant was a victory in his eyes. Each act of cruelty was a shield against prophecy. But deep within him, in the hidden prison of his belly, the children still lived. Their cries echoed in the darkness, muffled but unbroken. They stirred restlessly, pressing against the walls of their father's body. Cronus could not hear them, but fate could. Destiny does not vanish when buried. It grows stronger. Rhea's heart was broken. Yet within her grief, a spark of defiance flickered. She could no longer stand by as each child was devoured. She could no longer allow Cronus's fear to destroy what she had born into the world. Her sorrow turned to resolve. She would not lose them all. Time passed, and Rhea once again carried a child. But this time, she vowed the story would not end in sorrow. She sought out Gaia, her mother, whose wisdom ran deep in the roots of the earth. Gaia listened to her daughter's cries, and her heart ached. She had seen the cruelty of Uranus, and now she saw it again in Cronus. But she also saw a chance of the cycle to turn, for destiny to be fulfilled. She whispered to Rhea a plan born of secrecy, courage, and defiance. When the child was born, Rhea would not place him into Cronus's waiting hands. She would hide him far from his father's reach, and in place of the infant, she would give Cronus a stone wrapped in swaddling cloth, so that his fear might blind him into swallowing it. It was a dangerous gamble, for if Cronus discovered her deception, his wrath would fall upon her with no mercy. But Rhea's heart was set. She would not let her last child be taken. Hope, faint but burning, returned her eyes. The day came. The cries of a newborn filled the air, piercing and fragile, yet carrying with them the weight of destiny. Rhea looked upon the child, her tears falling freely. She held him close, her arms trembling, her heart torn between fear and love. This child, she knew, would change everything. She named him Zeus. The name rang with promise, with thunder, with rebellion yet to come. Quickly, Rhea carried her son away, far from the palace of Cronus. She hid him upon the island of Crete, in a cave deep within the mountains. There, nymphs guarded him, feeding him with honey and milk. A goat named Amalthea gave him her milk as well, nourishing the child destined to rule the heavens. His cries were drowned by the beating of drums and the clash of cymbals, so that Cronus would not hear him. His laughter grew in secret, hidden from the eyes of the king. And in the palace of the Titans, Rhea returned with a stone wrapped in cloth. Cronus looked upon it with suspicion, but fear overpowered doubt. He opened his mouth wide and swallowed it whole, believing he had devoured yet another child. He never knew that Zeus had escaped. Within his belly, the swallowed children stirred. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon waited in darkness, their time not yet come. The prophecy still burned, its words etched into destiny. And far away in secret, the child who would one day free them grew stronger. The golden age continued. Mortals still lived in peace, unaware of the silent war brewing within the halls of the Titans. Cronus still sat upon his throne, believing he had defeated fate. But the earth knew better. The sea knew better. The sky itself waited. For the sins of the father cannot silence destiny. The chain of betrayal cannot be broken. And from the womb of secrecy, rebellion was rising. Yet hope was not lost. For Rhea's final act of defiance would set into motion a war that would shake the heavens. The halls of the Titans were silent. Rhea's cries had long since faded into whispers, buried beneath the weight of her sorrow. She had given Cronus children, and Cronus had devoured them all. One by one, their laughter had vanished into darkness, swallowed whole by the king who feared his own blood. But when the time came for her final child, Rhea could no longer endure. Her heart was broken, her arms empty, her soul heavy with grief. She could not watch another life taken, could not hear the cry of another child silenced in her husband's stomach. And so she chose defiance. She fled from the shadow of Cronus, carrying her newborn in trembling arms. Her journey took her across the sea, through winds and waves, until she reached a place untouched by her husband's gaze, the island of Crete. There, in a hidden cave high in the mountains, she gave her son into the care of others. The nymphs gathered around, their hands gentle, their song soft. They cradled the child with tenderness, their voices rising in lullabies to calm his cries. Beside them stood Amalthea, the she-goat whose milk flowed rich and sweet. She nursed the infant, her warmth protecting him from the cold. To the outside world, it was only a cave, a place of shadows and stone. But within, destiny stirred, for this was no ordinary child. His name was Zeus. Rhea wrapped the stone in swaddling cloth, heavy and cold, and carried it back to Cronus. Her face masked her fear, her hands trembling as she presented the bundle to her husband. Cronus took it without hesitation. He did not unwrap it. He did not question. He opened his mouth wide and swallowed it whole, believing he consumed his last child. And so Cronus was deceived. In his arrogance, he thought himself safe. In his fear, he had blinded himself. He never knew that his true son lived, growing in secret, far beyond his reach. On the island of Crete, the hidden child thrived. The nymphs fed him honey, their voices weaving stories of stars and seas. Amalthea gave him her milk, her horns gleaming as she stood watch over him. Around the cave, the Curetes danced and clashed their spears against their shields, their noise drowning out his cries so that Cronus could never hear. Zeus grew strong and swift. His eyes burned with light no child had carried before. His laughter echoed like thunder across the mountains. His steps shook the earth. His voice carried the promise of storms. The earth herself seemed to nurture him. The trees bent low, offering their fruit. The rivers sang, their waters pure. Even the eagles wheeled above, as though guarding the child destined to one day rule the sky. The world watched him grow in silence and secrecy. Yet Zeus did not only grow in body, he grew in mind. The whispers of his destiny reached him even as a child. The nymphs spoke of the father who devoured his children, of the prophecy that one son would rise to end him. He listened, he learned, he remembered. In his eyes, innocence gave way to fire. He knew who he was. He knew what he must do. Years passed, and Zeus became a youth. He trained upon the mountains, his arms strong, his spirit fierce. He wrestled with wild beasts, his hands unyielding. He climbed the highest peaks, his breast steady, his gaze fixed on the heavens above. The blood of Titans flowed in him, but it was sharper, faster, hungrier. For he was not only a son of Cronus, he was the child of prophecy. Rhea visited him in secret, her heart swelling with both sorrow and pride. She told him of his siblings, swallowed by their father's fear. She told him of Cronus's cruelty, of the prophecy that bound their fate. Her words carved themselves into Zeus's heart. He could not forget. He would not forgive. The laughter of his stolen brothers and sisters echoed in his dreams. Their cries haunted his nights. He vowed to bring them back, to free them from the darkness. One day, as Zeus walked the mountain paths, the earth itself seemed to whisper to him. The voice of Gaia rose from the stones, deep and steady. She told him of the cycle, of sons who strike down their fathers, of destiny that could not be broken. She placed in his hands wisdom beyond his years. She warned him of the power Cronus wielded and of the price of defiance, but she also gave him hope. She told him that fate was not his enemy, but his ally. Zeus bowed his head, his resolve hardened. He would not falter. He would rise. As he grew into manhood, his strength became undeniable. His arms were as strong as stone, his voice as deep as thunder, his spirit as unshakable as the mountains themselves. The nymphs watched with awe, Amalthea with pride, Gaia with certainty. Zeus was no longer a hidden child. He was a storm waiting to break. Meanwhile, in his palace, Cronus sat upon his throne, ignorant of what stirred beyond his sight. He believed the prophecy was silenced. He believed he had devoured every threat. But in his belly, his children stirred. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon waited in silence, their time yet to come. And across the sea, Zeus prepared. The world itself seemed to hold its breath. The golden age glittered still, but cracks had begun to spread. Shadows gathered at the edges of light. Mortals lived in peace, But the heavens braced for war. The hidden child had become a man. His eyes burned with fire. His hands gripped the promise of thunder. His heart carried the fury of all who had been wronged. The seed of rebellion had been planted, and soon it would bloom. When Zeus came of age, the time of silence ended, and the storm of war began. The years of silence had ended. Zeus had grown strong. Hidden on the island of Crete, his spirit sharpened by secrecy, his body hardened by the weight of destiny. He was no longer the child concealed by his mother's defiance. He was a storm waiting to break across the heavens. The prophecy lived within him, burning like fire in his veins. He had sworn to free his brothers and sisters, the children swallowed by Cronus, the lives stolen before they could breathe the air of the world. And so Zeus returned. He did not return with swords blazing or thunder cracking, but with cunning, for he knew his father was not weak, and his kin were not powerless. To strike blindly would be to fail. To succeed, he would need wisdom, patience, and the strength to endure what was to come. Gaia, the earth herself, welcomed her grandson with pride. She had once placed a sickle into the hands of Cronus to strike against Uranus. Now she whispered to Zeus, guiding him toward the path that fate had carved. Together, they shaped a plan. Cronus still sat upon his throne, crowned and feared, believing himself victorious over destiny. He had devoured his children and swallowed his fear with them. His pride blinded him. But Gaia brewed a potion from the depth of the earth, a draught of power and release. Zeus disguised himself, entered the halls of Cronus, and offered the king the drink as though it were a gift. Cronus, unknowing, lifted the cup to his lips. The moment he drank, the silence of ages was broken. His body trembled, his stomach heaved, and one by one, the children he had swallowed were forced back into the light. Hestia, firstborn, keeper of the sacred flame. Demeter, who would bring the bounty of harvest. Hera, destined for the throne of Olympus. Hades, the lord of shadow. Poseidon, the ruler of seas. They spilled forth, reborn into the world, alive and whole, their strength unbroken despite their years of imprisonment. And at last, they stood beside Zeus, no longer lost but united. The children of Cronus were together again. The earth trembled as destiny awoke. The air thickened with power, for the age of silence had ended. The children of the swallow now rose in defiance of their father. But Cronus was not a broken old king. He was the lord of the golden age, the ruler of the Titans, a giant among giants. Around him stood his brothers and sisters, the firstborn children of earth and sky. The world held its breath. Father stood against son, giants against gods, titans against the children of prophecy. The clash that followed will be known for all time as the Titanomachy, the war of gods and giants. The earth quaked as the first blows were struck. Mountains cracked, rivers boiled, forests burned. The seas rose in towering waves, their waters swallowing the shores. The skies themselves caught fire, torn apart by the force of battle. Zeus hurled his lightning, bolts of fire that split the heavens. Cronus raised a sickle, its stone edge unyielding, its curve sharp enough to wound even the sky. The clash of their weapons shook the stars. Beside Zeus stood his siblings. Poseidon struck the seas with his might, summoning waves to crash against the earth. Hades cloaked himself in shadow, his hand cold as night, spreading fear into the hearts of enemies. Hera, Demeter, and Hestia brought order, light, and fire, their strength weaving together with their brothers. But Cronus was not alone. The Titans rose, vast and terrible. Oceanus, endless waters circling the earth, sent floods crashing into the battlefield. Hyperion blazed with light, his fire scorching the air, his brilliance blinding the eyes of foes. Ceus, Crius, and Iapetus roared with fury, their size shaking the ground, their strength rivaling mountains. Themis, who had once carried law, now stood bound by loyalty, her power twisting against the children who sought to bring justice. Phoebe's visions burned, guiding her kin as they struck against the rising gods. The battle was not of men and mortals, but of beings vast as the cosmos, their footsteps cratering the earth, their voices thunder rolling across eternity. For 10 years the war raged. The days bled into nights, the nights into days, and still the fighting did not end. Each side was unyielding, each blow matched by another. When the gods struck, the Titans struck harder. When the Titans advanced, the gods pushed them back. The earth groaned beneath the weight of war. Seas boiled into storms, lightning shattered the skies, mountains fell into dust. Mortals hid in fear. Their once peaceful world turned into a battlefield of chaos. The golden age had ended. Now the age of war had begun. Zeus fought with fury, his lightning scorching the heavens. He wielded power greater than any his father had ever seen, his bolts tearing through clouds with fire that blinded and deafened all. But still, Cronus stood. His sickle cut through thunder. His voice roared louder than storms. His strength refused to bend. The Titans were ancient, vast, unshakable. They had ruled since the beginning of time, and their roots ran deep into creation itself. To defeat them would take more than strength. The god began to tire. Their youth, their courage, their fury carried them far. But it was not enough. The war dragged on, year after year, and the skies bore scars that would never fade. For every bolt Zeus hurled, Cronus raised a shield. For every wave Poseidon summoned, Oceanus surged higher. For every shadow Hades cast, Hyperion's fire burned it away. The war was endless, a storm without calm, a cycle without end. And so Zeus understood victory would not come by force alone. No matter how fiercely they fought, the gods could not break the first giant of creation without help. Cronus had his kin. The Titans had their strength. But somewhere hidden deep in the earth lay beings even older, even more fearsome, chained since the dawn of time, beings whose fury could shake the heavens themselves. Zeus knew he would need them. The war could not be won without allies greater than Titans. Yet victory could not be won by strength alone. Zeus needed allies greater than Titans. The war of gods and giants raged on. For 10 long years, neither side bent nor broke. Zeus and his siblings struck with courage and fury, but the Titans endured with the weight of ages behind them. The skies bore scars of lightning. The seas churned in endless storms, and the earth split beneath the tread of beings too great for mortal eyes. The world itself seemed caught in a balance, unable to tip toward victory or defeat. Zeus knew then that strength alone would not break the Titans. To match power with power was to fight forever. If the prophecy was to be fulfilled, if the rule of Cronus was to end, he would need more than the courage of gods. He would need allies greater than giants. Deep within the bowels of the earth, below even the realm of the dead, there was a place feared by all, Tartarus. It was a pit without end, a prison of shadows and torment, where the most dreadful of beings have been chained since the dawn of time. The Titans themselves had locked them away. So great was their terror of what dwelled there, and it was to this place that Zeus turned his gaze. Guided by Gaia, Zeus descended. The path was long and steep, winding downward through layers of shadow. The air grew heavy, thick with the cries of the damned, the whispers of things forgotten by the world above. At last, he reached the gates of Tartarus. They loomed vast and terrible, bound with chains forged from unbreakable metal, guarded by silence so deep it pressed against the heart. But Zeus was not deterred. He struck the chains with lightning, his power searing through the metal, his will breaking what no hand had ever broken before. The gates groaned, then burst open, and from within rose the prisoners of eternity, the Cyclopes, 3 brothers, each with a single blazing eye in the center of their foreheads. They were smiths of creation, masters of fire and forge, whose craft could shape weapons of unimaginable power. Yet they had been cast into Tartarus by Uranus, and later held there by Cronus, for their might was feared by all. Behind them came the Cinemanes, beings so vast, so fearsome, that even the Titans could not bear their presence. Each one carried 100 arms, each hand strong enough to tear mountains from the earth, each voice a roar that shook the heavens. Their bodies were terrible to behold, their fury unmatched, and so they had been buried deep, hidden away in darkness. When the gates opened, their cries of freedom shook the pit. They looked upon Zeus, and their eyes, bright as fire, dark as storm, fixed on him with question. Would he be their master or their enemy? Zeus raised his hand. He did not speak with arrogance or command. but with promise. He swore to them freedom. He swore to them vengeance. He swore that together they would break the chains of the Titans forever. The Cyclopes listened, and their hearts burned with the fires of their forges. The Cenomans listened, and their fury rose like storm clouds, eager for release. They agreed, and in that moment, the balance of war began to shift. The Cyclopes went to work from the fires of creation itself. They forged weapons not of iron or bronze, but power that no hand had ever held before. To Zeus they gave the thunderbolt, a weapon of storm and fire, swift as thought, deadly as judgment. It carried the power of the sky itself, a force that could shatter mountains and blind the stars. To Poseidon they gave the trident, a spear of 3 prongs, sharp as the teeth of the sea. With it, the Lord of Waters could summon storms, shake the earth, and command the depths of ocean and river alike. To Hades they gave the helm of invisibility, a crown of shadow woven from the very fabric of night. With it, he could vanish from sight, move unseen, and strike where no enemy could defend. These gifts were not mere tools. They were destiny forged into form. And when the gods took them into their hands, the air itself trembled. The war raged anew. Zeus hurled his thunderbolt, and the skies split with fire. Titans fell before its searing light. Their roars drowned in the crack of storm. Poseidon raised his trident, and the seas answered. Waves towered higher than mountains, crashing down upon the armies of the old order. The earth itself trembled, quaking under his strike. And Hades, cloaked in shadow, moved unseen to the battlefield. His helm hid him from the eyes of giants, and when his hand struck, it was with the cold of the grave itself. Beside them marched the Cenomans. Their 100 arms hurled boulders larger than fortresses, tearing mountains from their roots and casting them like stones. Their roars thundered across the skies, their strength breaking the lines of Titans. The battlefield shook as never before. Fire rained from the heavens. Seas swallowed the land. The cries of giants mingled with the thunderous storms. The world itself seemed on the edge of collapse, torn between old and new. Cronus watched with fury. His sickle gleamed, still sharp, still terrible. He fought with the power of an age long past, his blows shaking the earth, his voice roaring across the battlefield. His brothers stood with him. The might of the Titans gathered, their size and strength unyielding. But for the first time, they faltered against the thunderbolt, the trident, the helm of shadow. Even the first giants began to bend. The war had turned. Zeus stood at the center of the storm, lightning blazing in his hands, his voice commanding the skies. Beside him, his brothers and sisters fought with power never seen before. Behind him, the Cenomans tore through the lines of the Titans, their fury unstoppable. The children of Cronus were no longer the swallowed, the hidden, the forgotten. They were gods. For years more the war raged, but now the balance leaned toward Olympus. Each battle carried the weight of victory closer. Each strike of thunder, each crash of wave, each roar of shadow brought the downfall of the Titans nearer. Yet still Cronus did not yield. His pride would not bend. His fear would not allow it. He raised the sickle again and again, his voice crying out against destiny. He would not surrender. The war built toward a single moment, a final clash that would decide not only the fate of Cronus, but the fate of the cosmos itself. But Cronus would not surrender easily, and the final battle would decide the fate of the cosmos. The war had reached its final hour. For 10 long years, the heavens had burned, the seas had roared, and the earth had trembled beneath the weight of gods and giants. The Titanomachy had torn creation apart, and still neither side had yielded. But now, at last, the storm gathered for a single, final clash. The skies grew dark with clouds, heavy with fire and thunder. The seas rose high, their waves striking like walls against the shores. The mountains groaned, their roots cracking, their peaks shaking loose into dust. The last battle had come. At the center of the storm stood Cronus. His sickle gleamed with the same cruel edge that had once cut down Uranus. His eyes blazed with fury, his heart heavy with pride and fear. He had been king of the cosmos, ruler of the golden age, master of the first giants. And he would not surrender that crown, not even to his own son. Before him stood Zeus. His hands burned with lightning. His voice, thunder rolling across the battlefield. He was no longer the hidden child, no longer the secret infant cradled in a cave. He was a storm itself, born to strike, born to overthrow. Father and son, past and future, clashed in a battle that shook the very bones of creation. Cronus swung his sickle, its arc slicing through the sky, sharp enough to tear the air apart. Zeus answered with a bolt of lightning, a blast of fire and storm that split the heavens in two. The sound thundered across the world, shaking seas and mountains alike. Poseidon raised his trident, striking the earth so hard that rivers boiled and seas rose into towering waves. Hades, cloaked in his helm of invisibility, moved unseen, his hands striking shadows into the hearts of the Titans. Hera, Demeter, and Hestia lent their strength as well, weaving law, fire, and harvest into the fabric of battle. But the Titans were vast, and they fought with the fury of an age that had lasted since the dawn of time. Oceanus rose in floods, drowning valleys. Hyperion blazed with fire, scorching earth and sky alike. Ceus hurled wisdom twisted into weapons, and Crius' fury tore at the stars. The battlefield became a place where no mortal could stand. Mountains were ripped from the earth and hurled like stones. Rivers boiled into steam, their waters turning to mist as fire rained from above. The ground split open, swallowing forests and fields whole. The cries of battle were not like the cries of men. They were the roars of giants, the shouts of gods, voices so vast that they shook the air itself. The Cenomanians unleashed their fury. With 100 arms each, they tore boulders from the earth and hurled them with such force that even Titans staggered. Their roars rose like storms, drowning out the cries of war. The Cyclopes lent their fire, forging new bolts for Zeus, new storms for Poseidon, new shadows for Hades. Their blazing eyes shone like stars, their strength echoing through every strike. The balance shifted. The gods pressed forward. The Titans staggered. One by one, the great giants of the old world began to fall. Oceanus, overwhelmed by Poseidon's command of the seas, was forced back into silence. Hyperion, blinded by the light of Zeus's thunderbolt, fell in flame. Crius, battered by the 100 arms of the Cenomanians, collapsed into the dust of the earth. The battle roared on, but the tide had turned. The children of Cronus, once swallowed, once hidden, now stood triumphant. And at the center of it all, Cronus faced his son. The clash of father and son was the heart of the war. Cronus swung his sickle, striking again and again, each blow carrying the weight of ages. Zeus answered with lightning, his thunderbolts searing the sky, each strike carrying the promise of destiny. Their battle raged across mountains, through skies, across seas. Every strike of the sickle clashed with fire. Every bolt of lightning shook the heavens. But prophecy does not bend. Cronus faltered. His sickle struck once more, but Zeus's thunderbolt met it with fire greater than the sun. The weapon shattered, its edge broken, its strength undone. The roar of Cronus shook the earth. The might of the king of the Titans fell before the storm of his son. Cronus, who had once swallowed his own children to defy prophecy, was now defeated by the very child he had sought to destroy. The golden age was over. One by one, the Titans were seized. Chains unbreakable were forged by the Cyclopes. Chains strong enough to bind even the giants of creation. Zeus and his siblings cast the defeated into Tartarus. Deeper than death, darker than night. The pit swallowed them whole, its gates sealed with iron, its walls guarded by the Cenomanians. There, the Titans would remain, their cries echoing in the abyss, reminders of first giants who once ruled the cosmos. Their voices carried into eternity, but never again would they reign. The war was over, the skies cleared, the seas grew calm. The earth, though scarred, began to heal. Zeus stood as king, his brothers and sisters at his side. The age of the Titans had ended. The age of the Olympians had begun. But even in victory, the memory of the war lingered. Mortals would tell the days when mountains fell, when seas boiled, when fire rained from the heavens. They would speak of the first giants and of the gods who rose against them. The Titanomachy was not only a war of power, it was the turning of an age. And though the Titans were bound in chains, their legacy would not vanish. Their cries still echo, faint and far, carried on the wind, whispered in the storms, hidden in the shadows of mountains and seas. The first giants were gone, but never forgotten. But the victory of Zeus did not end the age of giants. It was only the beginning of new legends. The cries of the Titans had faded into the depths of Tartarus, bound by chains forged to never break. The war was over. The skies cleared, and a new age began to rise from the ashes of the old. Upon the highest peak of Mount Olympus, Zeus took his throne. Lightning crowned him. Thunder answered his command, and the heavens bent to his rule. At his side stood his brothers and sisters, each with their own dominion. Poseidon claimed the seas, vast and untamed. Hades took the underworld, shadowed and eternal. Hera, Demeter, and Hestia carried law, harvest, and flame into the world of men. It was the beginning of the Olympians. The Titans had fallen. Their reign had ended, yet their presence was not erased. Though they lay imprisoned in Tartarus, their memory remained. The world carried the scars of their war. The mountains torn from the earth, the rivers boiled in fury, the skies burned in fire. These were reminders of the power once held by the first giants. Mortals whispered to them in fear and awe. They spoke of Cronus, who devoured his own children to escape fate, only to be struck down by the very hand he feared. They spoke of Oceanus, Hyperion, and all the others whose strength had shaped the dawn of the world. The Titans were gone, but they were not forgotten. Their legacy lingered. The winds carried their echoes. The stars held their shadows. In every storm, in every quake, in every fire that burned across the land, people sensed the ghosts of giants who had once ruled before the gods. They became cautionary tales, warnings of pride, of power, of the endless cycle that binds fathers to sons and rulers to their fall. For the story of the Titans is not only a tale of giants, it is a story of creation and destruction, of thrones gained and thrones lost. It is a reminder that no power, no matter how vast, can escape the hand of destiny. Zeus ruled as king, but even he knew the truth. He had risen against his father, as Cronus had risen against Uranus. The cycle had turned once more, and who could say when it might turn again? The lesson of the Titans was clear. Power is never eternal. Pride is never safe. From blood spilled in rebellion, new thrones rise, but always with shadows at their feet. In the quiet of night, mortals looked upon the stars and wondered. They saw constellations blazing in the heavens, but behind them, they felt the weight of those who had come before. The Titans were not dead. They were not gone. They had become part of the fabric of the world, as eternal as the soil and sky. The story of the Titans was etched into the heart of humanity. Every empire that rose, every king that ruled, every war that shook the earth, each echoed the tale of giants who had once held the cosmos in their hands. The cycle of power and downfall was no myth. It was truth, repeated through ages. The Titans were the first giants, and their story remains eternal. They remind us of the fragility of thrones, the danger of pride, the weight of prophecy, and the endless chain that binds generations. Their cries from Tartarus still echo in storms. Their shadows still stretch across mountains. Their names still whisper in the silence between stars. The gods may rule, but the memory of the Titans will never fade. You have just heard the tale of the Titans, the first giants of Greek mythology. If these echoes of the past stirred your imagination, share this story so others may walk these forgotten paths with you. If you wish to hear more, to journey deeper into the worlds where myths breathe and legends awaken, stay with Lost Giants. Like this story if it spoke to you. Subscribe if you wish to walk further into the shadows of time. Share it so others may remember the giants who came before the gods. For many more tales still lie waiting, hidden in the folds of history, buried beneath stone and memory. Stories of creatures older than the earth, of heroes who face the impossible, of mysteries that even the gods could not silence. The world remembers them still. The echoes linger, and in those echoes, legends live again.